morning comes from the Gospel according to Luke. But on the first day of the week at early dawn, they came to the tomb, taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly 2 men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground. But the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners and be crucified, and on the third day rise again?" Then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them, who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves. Then he went home, amazed at what had happened. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Friends, I regret to say that I have unwelcome news today. I am canceling Easter. I do not want to do this, but I don't believe I have any choice. You see, Grace is not here. I'm sure I know she has not come in. I thought for sure, today of all days, that she would come. But let's simply be honest. You cannot have Easter without the presence of grace. Actually, it's no surprise. You may remember the trouble we had with Grace a few weeks ago. I had invited her to come to worship, and truth be told, she went to a party instead. It was a celebration of some lost son who had returned. But I don't know of any parties going on right now, but she's out there somewhere. That's the way Grace is. You just can't pin her down. And when you least expect it, she will find you in the most unlikely of places. Well, it was just a few months ago, I was watching the news, and they did a broadcast on all the devastation done by Hurricane Sandy. And all of a sudden, right in the middle of it, there she was. There was Grace. I had not expected to see her there at all, but she was present, helping all who were in need. She really is something. I see her around town all the time. The first time I went to the Sharing Center to learn about how they help others, later on I realized that I had stood right next to her. She had been right there next to me, and I only recognized that it had been her after I had left. Actually, you'd be surprised at how many people never realize that they had met Grace. She can help someone out in a time of need, help them through a dark trial, and they never realized that it was Grace who had been there for them. In fact, they'll tell you they'd done it all themselves, pulled themselves through without the help of anyone. You can't convince them otherwise. You try to tell them that it was Grace who helped them, and they'll scoff at the very notion. Amazingly, though, Grace doesn't seem to mind. At least, she doesn't stop being there for people in their time of need, whether or not they acknowledge her help. You see, Grace doesn't ask for anything in return. That's just the way Grace is. Of course, part of the problem is that Grace doesn't offer us what we want. That is why we so often don't appreciate her presence. Instead of giving us what we want, she offers us what we need. We may want the pain of a broken relationship or some other suffering to end, but she shows up to help us work through it. We want it to stop, but she pushes us further. It's no wonder that so many people meet grace without ever realizing it. Still, the fact that so many people can meet grace and look her right in the eye and not ever recognize her raises an unsettling question for me. How many times have I met grace and not recognized her myself? To be honest, it's probably more often than I would care to admit. Oh, I may realize in hindsight that she's helped me, but I want to recognize her presence while she is in my midst. Not years later when I finally realized how much I've matured because grace kept me on the path way back when. Indeed, the more I reflect on this hope, the more I realize that this is the reason we are here this morning. We came to see grace. We need her now. Maybe if we pray hard enough, God will make her come. Right? Or maybe if we put enough in the offering, grace will be impressed by our sacrifice and reward us with a visit. Oh, I know what grace would say to that. She'd just smile and go about her plans in her own time and not mine. No, I cannot command grace to appear here today. Prayer is not an incantation that we can recite to charm her, and no offering or sacrifice can obligate her presence. That's not the way grace operates. Yet, when we gather together like this, to worship and to serve, we prepare ourselves to recognize her when we do meet her. It's like that story where the women first go to Jesus' tomb early in the morning. They don't find Jesus. Instead, they find two men dressed in white who announce that he is risen. The men in white do not present, however, the risen Christ to the women, perhaps for the same reason that I cannot present grace to you on demand. Grace, like the risen Christ, is free. She is free and comes and goes as she deems fit. The church, then, is like those two men dressed in white. We proclaim that grace is loose in the world and equip you to recognize her when she finds you. The church tells the story of grace and sends us out in the full expectation that you will encounter her in your own life and that you will meet her and find her alive and active in the world in the most unexpected of places. Then again, why should you believe me? The disciples did not believe the second-hand account that they were given, so why should you believe a second-hand account from me or from the church? Well, consider this. Having been prepared by the proclamation of the church that Christ is alive, that grace is out there, having been prepared in the life of the church to have at least an inkling of what she is like and how she arrives at the most unexpected times and in the most unexpected places, you meet her face to face. And once you meet grace, once you have been loved by grace, you will believe. I'm confident of that. You will. So, friends, I do have good news today. It is Easter after all. For even though I cannot command the presence of grace among us today, neither can I keep her away. Nothing can. And when you least expect it, grace appears. Let all God's people say,